All right, welcome back, everybody. Sorry for the restart. So, welcome to everybody around the world, and welcome to all my subscribers. So, let's get straight into it. The UFO mythos, the field of what UFOlogy gets into in terms of its mythos and like what they believe, the cosmic interaction with Earth, the certain alien races, what they do here, what they've been doing here. All of that is actually in the Bible. Okay, I've talked about this many times before. I even get into it in my systematic theology briefly in a chapter or two, but it's all there in the Bible. So where we can see it starting, this mythos being revealed to us in these ancient texts, is in the opening chapters of Genesis, where God says that He created the heavens and the earth, okay, and filled them with life. Okay, so we're told that God expanded out the heavens. We know from science that the universe seemed to have been expanding or such, but God filled these expanding heavens with life. And we hear from the other verses in the Tanakh that, the whole Bible really, that these other beings that are up in the heavens, they can disobey God. And if they do, they're punished for it. They can obey God. They do obey God. They serve God. They even serve him in his, cosmic legions. They do activities with the earth. They interact with the earth on certain occasions, um, whether to create or destroy or to monitor and regulate and this and that there. So the Bible talks about all this cosmic creation, and it talks about this cosmic interaction with earth. But in the opening chapters of Genesis, we're introduced to the fact that God has, created the heavens, put the life in it, created the earth, put the life in it. He created all the different creatures on the earth, including man, eventually man. Now, that also roughly fits with the evolutionary time scale as well, because I believe there is a creator, and I also obviously believe there is truth to evolution, right? So, if God created all these life forms on the earth, and welcome back, and sorry, squawks or squawks, however you pronounce it, for restarting the video if you're returning. So the cat was distracting me heavily. But in the opening chapters of Genesis, we're introduced to Adam and Eve being in the Garden of Eden. Okay. Now, I'll also mention, because it's relevant to this whole topic here for the video, that there are two creation stories in Genesis. A lot of people overlook this and don't stop and think about it. They're different, they contradict one another. And the author of the Bible, or of this book at least, is not going to sit here and contradict himself from one page to the next. I mean, it's literally on the next page, there's a different creation story with a different order of creations. As I explain better in my various videos and in my systematic theology as well, what I show is that there's two creation stories for a reason. One is a cosmic creation story. One is a more, recent creation story. So we're told a creation story. I can't remember offhand which one is which, right? But it's in the book and it's self-evident when you read it. One of the creation stories is just about like the human species in general, and it's a cosmic creation story. Okay, and in that cosmic creation story, and only in that account of the Eden story, sorry, only in that creation story from Genesis, does it specify that Adam and Eve were expelled from the garden and all of that. The other creation story is different, right? So they're two different ones. The simple answer here is because one is a cosmic story, one is more earthly story. Okay, so my belief is that we all did originally come, maybe it was this planet just further back in time, or a similar planet further back in time. Doesn't really make a difference. It could have been even on Mars or Venus billions of years ago when they were more inhabitable. But nonetheless, we were in this other place, which was termed the Eden. Okay. And when we disobeyed our ancestors, they were kicked out. Okay. They were kicked out and they relocated to this earth. Okay. Now, in the Eden, there were reptilians. Okay. And the term Nahash in Genesis is not talking about a snake, a regular old snake. The Nahash, if you look up in Jewish literature, it describes the Nahash as a bipedal being that could speak and was very intelligent. You don't even need Jewish literature for this. If you just read the Genesis story, it tells you that the serpent walked on well, it doesn't say how many legs, right? But it was erect and upright. It was bipedal, and that it was very intelligent and that it spoke. It's clearly not talking about a snake. Now, the Nahash, it says, was the most subtle of all of God's creation. What does this mean? This means that God created the Nahash, this bipedal reptilian humanoid type being, superior to all the other creation in terms of its intelligence. Now, that's very interesting when you stop and think about it, because in UFOlogy, reptilians are like the big shots. They are way up there in the hierarchy. In fact, most UFOlogy interpretations put them up there at the top. So, but getting back to the Bible here, it tells us that is the most subtle of all the creatures. If you look up the Hebrew for that word, it doesn't mean evil. It doesn't denote evil or anything like that. It denotes it's not defined as the word intelligence, but it means cunning, crafty, imprudent. And if you look up the Hebrew, analysis of the Hebrew term, because Hebrew is complex, but the old school interpretation is that prudent in a good sense, right? So God didn't create anything to be evil. That's what we have to understand first. So just going by the facts, we can see that this creature is obviously intelligent, very, very intelligent, and it was the most cunning, crafty, and intelligent creature of all the ones that God had made. So on our earth, whichever creation story you're looking at, it's irrelevant. The Edenic story of the serpent being and the people shows you that reptilians have been here from day one. Okay, number one. And not only that, but they're superior to us in intelligence. Okay, factoid number two. Okay, they're bipedal, they're like serpents. And it's often been speculated that the seraphim, which are only mentioned a couple times in the Bible, such as in Isaiah, that there's some type of connection between Nahash and seraphim. Now, the only difference is that seraphim are described as having wings, but these could be metaphors as well. But it's interesting that Nahash also can denote a flying fiery serpent. And unless it's specifying about some extinct form of small dragon that was like a bird snake thing with wings that flew, which is entirely possible. I believe that's possible. It could also be an allusion, a poetic allusion to the fact that the Nahash had flying capabilities, i.e. with craft. Okay, not that they necessarily had wings themselves. But in either case, we don't need to fuss about stuff like that. We know that the reptilians, according to the Bible, were here day one. I don't know if they were here first before us. They may have been. Actually, no, now that I think about it, they probably were created first, because he made all the forms of life and then made man last. Okay, so there you go. I answered my own question. So reptilians were here first. They're superior to us in terms of intellect. Okay, and going by all the, up to modern descriptions and interactions with reptilians and this and that, they're superior biologically. Okay, they're bigger, stronger, everything. So they're a superior species that was here first. Now, God said that Adam and Eve would rule over all the animals and this and that there, and over the, run the garden, take care of the garden, that's, animals, plants, everything. Okay? But we can't forget that the reptilians were here first, and they were more intelligent. According to the story, one of them duped Adam and Eve into disobeying God and getting kicked out. And that begat the animosity between reptilians and humans. So, whilst the serpent himself didn't outright lie, he basically said what God said. I don't know if you read it, he didn't really twist anything. He said, did God allow you to eat from all the plants in the garden? Eve said yes, except for blah blah blah. And the reptilian said, well, he didn't accuse God of lying. He didn't say anything. He said that God knows full well that if you eat from this tree, you will not die. Okay, God had told Adam and Eve that if they eat from the tree, they're going to die that day. Is God a liar? No. But the reptilian didn't lie, because when they ate from the tree, did they die? No, they didn't die. They especially didn't die that day. So it's not that God's a liar. It's that this is a deeper story with a lot of metaphorical or deeper meanings. So, and I'm not trying to promote the serpent here. I'm just relaying facts. You read the story yourself, you can see that. So the serpent used his cunning craftiness to mislead them at best, I think, and he was punished for that. But in either case, the whole story is a great metaphor that shows us, it was literal, but it's also a metaphor in that it shows us an overall storyline for the reptilian human interaction on this earth. Okay, it goes back to day one, and from day one, the reptilians have beef with humans. Okay, that's the problem. Maybe the reptilians are upset that God made Adam and Eve and appointed them above them, right? Maybe the reptilians had a gripe about that. Okay, maybe it was just one reptilian who had a gripe with that. But we can see that God created reptilians. This means that reptilians are not evil. God doesn't create evil things. Okay, he created reptilians and made them, he purposely made them superior to us. So that means reptilians are Terrans. They're not necessarily from another star system. I'm not going to make this overly complex and get into the two creation stories, blah, 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 right? But they can be elsewhere ever. They can be elsewhere anywhere. They can be elsewhere anyways, sorry. Just like how humans are on other planets in the universe, according to UFO mythos, and even according to the Bible. So a lot of heavenly messengers that came to the earth looked exactly like humans, and we can't tell them apart. So it's an age-old story about this interaction and this beef between humans and reptilians. And if we apply the New Testament, analogy to this, the New Testament gives a lot more detail on the dragon, the serpent, and this and that there, and how he doesn't like people. Now, a Jewish interpretation is that the Nahash was a Nahash. It's got nothing to do with Satan, and they don't believe in a Satan being, right? Some divisions of Judaism do, but overall Orthodox Judaism does not believe that Satan is a evil being. They believe that Satan is an angel that works for God as a tempter of man and a trier of man. Okay, and they believe in a evil inclination, which is not a being. It's just your freedom of will being abused to do what is wrong. That's what they call the Ha-Satan. But if you look at the New Testament, it really elaborates on the idea of this dragon. They call him the serpent. They illustrate him as a great dragon up in the cosmos who battles against God's forces and gets cast down to the earth. And it just gets even more interesting when you're bringing the New Testament into this, because UFO mythos talks all about these cosmic battles between reptilians and other races. Now, the main races that are mentioned in UFOlogy are reptilians, humans / Nordics / Pleiadeans, and the beloved and well-known Greys. Okay, and the Greys come in many different forms. Now, the Bible does not speak much about Greys at all. It would just be mere speculation to say that it does. There's only one place in the New Testament in Revelation where it says that some unclean spirits that resemble frogs will go out to deceive even the elect with great signs and wonders. And you could speculate that these are Greys because according to the literature and declassified documents, Greys are not entirely amphibious, but they appear to be somewhat amphibious in nature and biology. And they do have large, big black eyes. Their skin is similar to amphibian and this and that there. So, but outside of that, the Bible's full of mentions of, the serpent, the Nahash, and in New Testament with the serpent, the dragon, and of human-looking angels, okay, celestial beings. And the UFO mythos says that, and this is just wrapping everything up as one big giant iceberg ball, but in the UFO mythos, if you go way back billions of years and whatnot, the reptilians from Draco supposedly were naughty, and they went around trying to colonize other planets and such, okay? This is actually, you can argue, mentioned in the Bible too, because the Bible does mention, Jesus says it, that the ruler of this world is Satan, that serpent, who is the Nahash, okay? So Jesus is revealing that the reptilians, or at least one, but the reptilians rule the world. You could ask yourself, why would they rule the world? Why doesn't God, just end Satan and this and that there? Well, if they were part of the creation to start with, if they were here before us, and if God made them intellectually and biologically superior to us, then they have every right to be here, right? And for whatever other political reason, it just ended up being that the one called Satan, or regarded as Satan, ruled the earth. But Jesus said to himself that that Satan was the ruler of this world. Okay, if we look in Revelation from the New Testament, it talks about that how this one Nahash, the bad guy, didn't like Jesus, had beef with God and Jesus, got Jesus put to death, and that when Jesus resurrected, went back up into the heavens where he came from, that God's forces battled against Satan and all of his messengers and cast them down to the earth. This is UFO mythos, right? The Draco Reptilians, who are up in space originally, are said to be colonizers. Okay, they go around like the dark side, taking planets over. And it says that a long time ago, they did battle with planets of the Greys and with planets with human-looking beings like Pleiadeans, Nordics, and whatnot. Okay, in that these three main groups of races have interaction with this Earth for whatever reason. That's the UFO mythos, but that's exactly what the Bible talks about. It says that Satan was up in the heavens originally. Even First Enoch lines up with Old and New Testament. So Satan was a reptilian species, a Terran reptilian species. He's the individual, but his type, his overall species, the reptilians, were from outer space originally, right? Like the New Testament says, and like First Enoch says. But they had the right to interact with Earth, even a right appointed by God, as watchers and monitors to help monitor and regulate the Earth. They are even the Baals, the lords, that would rule over different cities to help guide people and this and that there. When God divided up the nations, he divided them according to the number of the sons of God. And there are 70 sons of God. And even in, what do you call it? The Sumerian and those type of texts and religions, they talk about the same thing. God, they called El, he had 70 sons, and it's all in the Bible as well. So what the Bible shows is that Satan and them, his type, were also up in the heavens. Just like how I said earlier, humans are on different planets, not just here. Same with reptilians, right? And the reptilians, according to the mythos, are naughty. They try to colonize. That lines up with what the Bible says. Jesus even said that, there have been great wars up in the heavens, and strong ones have been trying to take the kingdom of heaven by force until now. Jesus has a famous verse where he says that. But at the end of the day, they got cast out of heaven by God and Jesus. Okay? Now, thousands of years ago, before the great flood, like I was saying, God had divided up the nations according to the sons of God. Sons of God are Benai Elohim. Those are celestial beings. And, they could have been different types. Doesn't make a difference. But we know from First Enoch and from Genesis that some of these ones broke rules of non-interference, and they hybridized with people. They weren't allowed to do that. Okay, and they bore these mutated hybrid offspring called the Nephilim. Now, fast forward to modern UFO mythos, it says that these alien races are hybridizing with people, and it's the same biblical story that has been told for thousands of years, that naughty aliens break rules, interbreed with humans, and create hybrids. The Bible's been spoken about that, but that's what everybody talks about now in modern UFOlogy. And the big bad guys behind everything are the Dracos, the Reptilians, the Nahash. They are the big ringleaders that got kicked out of the heavens and bound to this earth. But before the flood, there were only 600 watchers, according to Enoch, who are appointed to watch over. Now, their chief was Azazel. His cohort was Semyaza, but Azazel is just another name for Satan. Okay? When Yom Kippur, the ritual was done in ancient Judaism and ancient Israel, year after year, you had the goat that went off in the wilderness to Azazel. And this is because in First Enoch is, it says, ascribe all sin, all of man's guilt. It's wordplay, but it says ascribe all sin to Azazel. Okay, now it's not that if there was never Satan on this earth that we wouldn't do bad things by ourselves. Of course we would. It's the evil inclination. Anybody with free will and an intellectual mind can do what is right or wrong. But the thing is that Azazel, Satan, was one of the 600 watchers who were appointed by God to help govern over the world. But they ended up being worshipped by the humans, and they also lusted over the humans, like First Enoch details and Genesis 6 details. And because of this, they ended up sleeping with some of the humans and bearing these mutant offspring. And First Enoch goes into greater elaboration where it says that the fallen watchers, taught mankind sciences that they weren't ready to handle yet. Okay, that same pattern we see in UFO lore now. Okay, not just that certain aliens are trying to hybridize with people, but that they're giving us technology that we're not capable of yielding yet, and so forth. It's all the same story. It's been told for thousands of years. Okay, God punished those 600 watchers. Well, out of the 600, only 1/3 fell and fell victim to Azazel, right, and his plans. But 200 of them were guilty out of the 600. That's where in Revelations it says that the great dragon who's up in outer space, the heavens, used his tail to gather down 1/3 of the stars. That doesn't mean that Satan fooled 1/3 of the angels that exist in all existence. It's 1/3 of the watchers who are pointed over, right? This is why it's explained and connects over to the book of First Enoch. So there were only 200 watchers who fell through their disobedience. They were bound here on this earth. Why? Because First Enoch says that they had created their own progeny on this earth. Okay, so that would be a good reason for them to be bound here, right? They had meddled with this planet. Why would God punish them and curse them to go on another planet and affect other life there? They had already been here, according to Genesis. Their species, their type had been here from day one anyways. They're interfering with us when they shouldn't be. They're interbreeding with us, and their progeny are on the earth. It would only be fitting that they're punished and imprisoned on this planet. Okay? But back at the time before the flood, whilst they were punished and imprisoned on this planet, they were still able to get out into the cosmos, and they did. And it leads up to the point over thousands of years where Jesus made that remark I said, where he says that strong ones have been trying to take the kingdom of God up in the heavens until this very day. Okay, and in Revelation 12, where it says that after Jesus died, resurrected, then there was a cosmic battle, and these reptilians and their messengers, whoever else was allied with them, were bound to this earth. Okay, so at that point there, and we don't know exactly when that occurs. This is after Jesus rose up, right? So in the last 2,000 years is when they were physically bound to this earth and they weren't able to leave our planet. Now, I've always wondered, does the moon count as part of this planet in God's eyes? Because a lot of speculation has said that the Greys, the Reptilians, have secret bases on the dark side of the moon. It could be entirely possible that the moon counts as part of the earth and that it's just like the extent to which they can be on, right? How is it that they're not able to leave the earth? It doesn't require magic. There could be some type of technological thing that is used to keep them here that prevents them from leaving with their craft. It could also just be that there are monitors, other good watchers around the earth, and based on visible UFO frequency, we can see that that's probably the case, that there's enough of these good forces around the earth to stop them physically when they try to leave. Okay? But in either case, what the Bible says matches up with UFOlogy in terms of, this basic space history of interaction with the earth. The Draco reptilians up in outer space being bad, trying to get people to do, trying to start wars and conflicts and this and that there and opposing God and getting bound to this earth. That shows the cosmic relationship between the and you could also even argue that where it talks about you saw a dragon up in the heavens in Revelation 12, that could be an allusion to the constellation Draco as well. Because even in the Hebrew for Nahash, if you look up the analysis of the Hebrew word and its ancient uses in ancient times, it was also an allusion to the constellation Draco. So, the UFO mythos and lore could actually be correct in that these reptilians also come from the planet, from the constellation of Draco. But there's so many different connections here. I think it's quite undeniable And when you also, that's enough about the reptilians, right? But that's why the reptilians are here. That's why they bother interacting with us. It's because they've been here since day one. That's my point. They've been here since day one. Genesis said that they would have conflict with humankind, right? When they got expelled from Eden. It also doesn't say that the serpent got expelled from Eden. It just says Adam and Eve did, but it says that they would be at enmity with one another. Okay, Jesus saying later, Satan rules this world. He's the ruler of this world. And these are pretty deep revelations when you stop to think about it. That a reptilian being rules this planet. That's pretty intense when you stop and digest it. Okay. But in terms of Pleiadians, now in UFO lore, a lot of people in literature state that Jesus was a Pleiadian and this and that there. Where he came from, we don't know. But what Jesus himself said is that he is not from this earth. He's from another world. That's what Jesus said. He also said, I'm from above. Okay. Very, very interesting to consider. We don't know where he came from. Doesn't really matter. But we know that Jesus, after his short span here on this earth, went back up to the heavens, returned back up there where he had been before in glory with God and this and that there as the ruler of God's armies. So Jesus is called the Prince of the Host, and host is a term for the host of the heavens. So all the beings that live throughout the cosmos, Jesus is in charge of them according to the Bible. Why would this be? Is because he was created as a primordial son of God. When God created him, however long ago, billions of years or aeons ago, he created Jesus in the human image. Jesus may have been, as I've suggested, the first created one in a human image. And that might be why he's like the leader. That would actually make the most sense. And why he would care about us and come down here and do things for us and, go through all his sufferings for us because we're made in his image, in the human image, like he was. And even though God doesn't have an image, when God created his, so-called sons, even though God doesn't use gonads to create children, he regarded us poetically as his children, Jesus being the first. Jesus would be like our genetic forefather, you could say, for the human image of God. And that would also play in hand with, if that is true about Jesus, then all the human looking races throughout the cosmos, even ones that differ from us, but all human, type beings throughout the cosmos could have their lineage through Jesus. I'm not saying that Jesus seeded us, but the image, lineage, like the genetic blueprint, right, could be all based upon Jesus. So that would make a lot of New Testament statements a lot more down to earth, funnily enough, because if that is the pattern that was followed, then a lot of statements that Jesus made would be far more plausible. Okay, it doesn't make sense that Jesus is just some random creation who suddenly got excelled to the top charts of hierarchy in the universe. He lived for 30 years on this earth. You know what I mean? I'm sure that in the trillions of years or whatever that the cosmos has been around, there's other beings who have done more and been around longer and such. But if Jesus was the primordial archetype human, then all those statements are just far more plausible. You see what I mean? And there is a place in Revelation where Jesus talks about the mystery or the secret of the seven stars. Now, the seven stars, for thousands of years across different cultures, the seven stars is a reference to the Pleiades. Okay? And Jesus is talking about in that Revelation vision that it is about him, the Son of Man, the messenger, holding these seven stars. And there's a secret about them. And he says that the seven stars are the seven messengers of the assemblies. Okay, so by him saying that, messengers, it's attaching extraterrestrial beings, even if they look like us, but cosmic beings to Pleiades. Okay, and by him saying that there's a secret or a mystery to it, he's grasping them in his hand, and they're messengers of the assemblies of God on this earth. That shows you a obviously strong hint at how Pleiadians could be the good, human-looking angel cosmic beings that are doing God's work and in, governing and intermediary work for this planet. Okay, and if we look in the Bible, from Old to New Testament, a lot of the angels that interacted with people were human looking and could not be differentiated from humans. We had Sodom and Gomorrah. The angels came down there, they looked like people, and people wanted to sleep with them because they were so beautiful. Pleiadeans are said to be extremely beautiful, right? In modern UFO lore. Perhaps it's because they live in such a great and righteous place. They never do sin, and God just blessed them, and they always look beautiful and youthful and this and that there. But in all these cases where angels interacted with people in the Bible, it said that they looked entirely human. When Jesus was born, there was obviously a UFO leading the wise men through the deserts to where Jesus was born. Stars don't do that. Comets don't do that. It says that this great light was, moving along. It would stop. It would even shine light down on the people. Stars don't do that. They don't stop and move, right? This was a UFO guiding the people to the birth of baby Jesus. And it says when they got to the birth of baby Jesus, that all of a sudden, all these celestial beings just manifested. So they teleported in there like Star Trek, like beam me up, Scotty. They all appeared to celebrate the birth of Jesus. Okay, this would make sense if Jesus was the great cosmic, archetype, prototype, primordial Son of God from up in the heavens, the great galactic ruler or whatnot under God, the great galactic prince, or maybe he rules many galaxies. I don't know. Maybe there's one of those for each galaxy, right? But in terms of us, right, and a galaxy could be the third heaven, right? We have Earth, we have the heavens, which are the skies and outer space around us. And then the second heaven, third heaven. These could be referring to solar system, galaxy, so forth, right? So if he was a galactic ruler who's incarnating on this earth for a divine religious purpose, it would make sense that the other aliens would turn up and celebrate his arrival here, right? And then after after they had their little meeting with the birth of baby Jesus, they departed, disappeared, and went up into the heavens, it says. They rose up and went off back into the heavens. When Jesus grew up, he said, I'm not from here, I'm from above, and I will return up above. And it says, when he did, he went back up into the heavens and all of that there. There's a few places. Then we end with Revelations, him holding the secret of the seven stars. So when you connect the dots, I think it's quite possible that, I'm not saying that Jesus was a Pleiadian, but Pleiadian in the sense that he was a human-looking cosmic one. Okay? It's also interesting to point out Jesus could do miracles. Jesus said that his miracles are done by God and all of that. But if you consider that when the disciples went around doing miracles, they were called by the pagans. The pagans considered the disciples as gods. And the pagans at the time were Romans and Greeks. The Romans and Greeks had, I've studied all that stuff for like 20 years, so I know all about it. But the Greek and Roman system, the same thing is spoken about in all these cultures around the world. Everybody went through one truth that they just, in their own cultural way, gave it their own names and interpretation. But it all comes to heaven and earth coming together. Uranus in Greco-Roman was a god. Uranus was a god representing the heavens. And Uranus mated with Gaia, which is earth. That represents the angels coming down to earth and bearing progeny with the mortal creatures, which is what First Enoch in Genesis 6 spoke about. And when Uranus did that, they bore these great hideous monsters, the Titans with many heads and arms, and these monstrous Nephilim, and they were cursed to stay within Hades as punishment. Okay? And some of these Titans, 10 of them, became the Greco-Roman pantheon of deities, right? So very strong connections here. Now, they looked human, right? They were human-looking extraterrestrials. Their lineages came from the cosmos, not from Earth. Okay, they're descendant from fallen angels, and not just that, but fallen angel Nephilim progeny. So the progeny of fallen angels who were Nephilim were the Greco-Roman gods. They're literally the children of the Titans. Okay, and they could interbreed with people, but more importantly, they had powers. Now, we might view this as silly myths and fairy tales, but I've always argued that it could be possible that different biological natures, especially from other planets, could be so superior to us. They could be billions of years more advanced in terms of evolution. They might be capable of things that we perceive as magical, okay? Or it could just be that because they're advanced, they have some technology. Like they had the Mercury's flying boots. That could have just been some type of technology that allowed the wearer to fly around. A cloak of invisibility. We have stuff like that now. Or was it a flying helmet that made him fly around? Hermes Mercury. But in either case, you get my point. We had the staff of Zeus, which was crafted by the Cyclops, one of the Nephilim, and this staff wasn't actual lightning. It was a long metal rod that emitted lightning. Okay, and he used that to battle against some of the other bad Nephilim, like such as Typhon, and to cast them underground and to destroy them. So a lot of this, and Zeus, thank you, memory. Zeus had flying cities. He had cities that would fly up in the sky. And in ancient Hinduism, Triparasura was a name for a devil figure or the devil figure. And Triparasura was called that because Triparasura meant the Asura, which is devil, Tri having three cities. So he was the devil that had three cities. And these three cities would float around in the sky. Okay. So in ancient times, these cosmic beings, a lot of which looked human, were here interacting with this earth, and the people perceived them to be gods. So we have the Greco-Roman mythology connecting right back over to First Enoch in the Bible, that the people ended up adoring and worshiping these angels, the fallen ones, and worshiped them as gods because they had these powers, whether technological or biological, right? But if they're billions of years more advanced than us, they might have biologies that are so advanced that they might be able to do things that are paranormal. They might be able to levitate, for all we know. I mean, we might think it's crazy, but it's not impossible. If you have billions of years of evolution for one species, it may be able to do some fantastic things. Maybe they can see in the dark. Maybe they have X-ray vision. Maybe they can generate heat or cold or emit energy from their hands. Maybe they can float. Maybe they can fly under their own power. These things are not absolutely impossible given the vastness of the cosmos and given billions of years more evolution. You don't know it's possible. Or it could just be technology, right? But what we know from extraterrestrials is that they have fantastic intellect and telepathic abilities, right? So when the disciples were going around doing miracles, they were regarded as the Greco-Roman gods or demigods on the earth. Okay, so this is because the Greco-Roman gods looked human, but they are capable of doing these more supernatural or magical feats. But anyways, I can't remember why I got into that originally, but in terms of Pleiadeans, if you're talking about in UFO mythology of the three core species, Reptilian, Pleiadian, and Greys, okay, the Reptilians and the Pleiadians are heavily mentioned throughout the Bible, one could argue, very fairly said. And all the later cultural references up until the modern time would just be adaptations of what the Bible always said. That's my point. Okay, the Greys are a little bit different, but nonetheless. And it gets confusing because the Greys, the actual Greys that crashed at Roswell, were very humanoid. There's a declassified military document that I came across. I don't know if it's obtainable anymore, but I read it with my own eyes. I had a video where I talked about it. And it says that the inhabitants of the two crashes were very human looking. They're just smaller and slightly different looking. The alleged alien autopsy video by Santilli, whether real or fake, I'm not getting into it. I believe it was real. But even Santilli, who later claimed that it was faked, he could have been coerced into saying that. He said that it's still modeled on exactly what the being looked like, and that he actually used stills from the original footage, the actual alien autopsy, in his recreation. So whether you want to believe the film itself was real or not, that's what the being looked like. And what the being looked like in that film is more human looking and less gray. Greys have big black almond eyes. These beings didn't have that. They just looked like petite elf-like humans who are about 3.5 or 4 feet tall. And that matches what the military document describes them as. So arguably, and they wear suits like we do. You know, in modern UFO culture, people have made it too cartoony with the Greys having these big like insect almond eyes. They look like praying mantises and all this fluff. When at the end of the day, the original stories about the Greys, they just looked like elf-like petite humans. That's the point, right? It's culture, modern culture and cartoons and movies that made them into something that's different. Okay? Even Travis Walton, he had one of the only credible interactions with Greys, and he describes them like I just did. Okay, he does not describe them as some weird little creature thing with big black eyes, and they're nothing to do with human look. They look nothing like humans. The real Greys are creatures that just look like small, petite people. A little bit tiny different skeletal or cranial structure, but they look human. I've long argued that the elves, you have the light elves and the dark elves from Norse mythology, ancient European mythology, and a lot of mythologies around the world talk about reptilian beings. They talk about elf-like beings who had great powers and technology. If you think about it, a couple thousand years ago in Europe, they really believed in giants, but that's what the book of First Enoch talks about and the Bible talks about. They really believed in light elves and dark elves. Light elves, they said, looked very beautiful like humans, but more beautiful. This would be Pleiadeans, right? The dark elves were short, diminutive, darker in, appearance and a little bit more nefarious. Okay, these could be the other beings that are of similar size to the Greys, the humanoid Greys, that people call Greys. At the end of the day, even UFO lore says there's like 7 or 8 species of the Greys. There's tall ones, short ones, this and that there, but none of those look human. The only ones that look human are the actual ones that crashed at Roswell and that have frequent interaction with the Earth, and they look far more human. And they're also far more amicable towards humans. It's the ones that don't look human that tend to be a little bit more nefarious and doing more nefarious things. But you should also never demonize something by its appearance, right? My point in saying all that splue is that the beings that crashed at Roswell, the actual Greys that look more like elves, they probably were one of the elfin type races from back in the day. Now, if you live a couple thousand years ago and you see these beautiful humans walking around, they have the ability to fly, or they have flying vehicles. They have little wands that do things. They can open portals. It's not necessarily fairy tales. It could have been they were Pleiadians. That's my point. And the dark elves could have been the more nefarious races that we call Greys, which are something completely different, right? They're not reptilian, but like the amphibious type ones with the big black eyes and all of that, and the taller variants that look more like insect, but they're still the same subspecies, underlying species. These could be the dark elves, right? Very, very interesting to consider, but basically they've been prevalent around the world and in so many different cultures, it's not even funny. Hinduism talks about the Nagas, the reptilians. It says that they have bases in the oceans, at the bottom of Great Lakes, and even under the ground. And, they've been talking about this. Hinduism and the Vedas are some of the oldest texts on the planet, if not the oldest. And they talk about these things. Sumerian texts with the Anunnaki and all that, Babylonian texts, everybody knows that stuff by now. They said that star beings came down, and they describe very similar beings as well. So the whole world has been aware of this UFO mythos. The Bible's always spoken about this UFO mythos, and we just have a cultural lens on it all now. But people just think it's all modern now. But I'm trying to point out how, it's biblical. The Bible talked about it, is my point. And it wasn't just localized Israel. The whole world experienced this stuff. And if you look in different countries around the world, some people worship the reptilian beings. If you look in the Americas, you have I think it was the Aztecs, and many of the cultures around the equator belt they gave adoration or worship to reptilians. In fact, a lot of these cultures built pyramids, which are of connection to reptilians. For example, in the Americas, you had the Aztec temples with the feathered plumed serpent deities that they worshipped. In India, you have the Naga temples with the same Naga serpents. in Asia as well, Oceania, the same thing in Africa, in Egypt. And no matter where you went around that belt of the equator, you had pyramids being built, not necessarily directly in worship to reptilian gods, but the reptilian gods were always associated with it. Okay? And that shows you an ancient stereotype that's been here for a very long time. And it all just points back to what the Bible spoke about. Okay, so very interesting food for thought. But I think I've covered everything I wanted to cover. But what's the takeaway from this? The takeaway is we should never be prejudiced or racist against a category of beings. We can't be prejudiced against all reptilians. Okay, God did not create them evil. All right, and maybe 99% of reptilians are actually good. Maybe only a few are bad. Right? So don't demonize reptilians. Don't demonize the Greys. Don't demonize the Pleiadeans. As I've said before, you could have a human-looking alien that is supremely evil, but just because he looks like one of us and he's very good-looking, you might think, oh, he looks nice. You could have a big, spooky, nasty-looking reptilian being, right, with sharp, pointy teeth and red eyes. You might think, oh my gosh, that thing looks evil, but he's not evil. He might be far more righteous than the evil human-looking one. So we shouldn't judge any category of being, whether human or celestial, as evil or good. We have to base them on the fruit of their actions, what they're doing, and that's how you define a tree, by its fruit. Not by the look of the tree, but by its fruit. Okay? So I think that's what everybody needs to do. We could have the reality that the seraphim, who are angels of God, are actually reptilians, and they're the good ones. And there was only maybe a few bad apples amidst the reptilians that ended up being in the bad basket of apples here on this earth. And I personally believe there's probably a lot of human-looking ones that are very bad as well. Based upon how bad humans are on this planet, it just wouldn't surprise me. But in UFOlogy and lore, there's a strong connection to Venus and Pleiadians and Mars, and back up in the Pleiades. So going back in the timeline for these extraterrestrial civilizations, allegedly when the Draco are going out colonizing, they went after the Greys' home planets. They even went after the Pleiadians. So they've had a long-standing, like, multi-billion-year war, I think it is, probably billions, between these different races. And Earth is just part of that whole program, right? Earth is very small and insignificant compared to the whole cosmos. But because they were here, that's why it's relevant to us. The Pleiadians in general are said to be good, said to be, they allegedly edify God. I think even the Greys speak about there being a God, but they acknowledge that he's greater than any being can comprehend. So at the end of the day, the good aliens appear to support the concept of God and God ruling the cosmos, and they appear to be righteously inclined. Just like humans, we might be righteously inclined, but we go off doing bad things. Same with any one of these beings. That's why the fallen angels were once good angels, even Satan, right? Any being can fall into good or bad. That's the difference. We shouldn't judge each other, on earth or in the heavens. We shouldn't judge. And I've always said that at the end of days, when the armies of God, the angels come, it says in the Bible that Jesus said that when he arrives to this earth for the rapture, he's going to commission the angels to go out and gather people. Now, these angels, when they come to us, might look human. They might look reptilian. They might be a little short, friendly Greys. They could be different things. We don't know what they're going to look like, but don't sit there and demonize them, because they might actually be there to help take us off the earth, right? And the Pleiadians are allegedly, like I said, righteously inclined. And according to the alleged interactions they've had in modern times, they come here preaching peace and love. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? They even speak about Jesus as a great cosmic ruler. So that's pretty interesting. So you have all these atheists and New Age people around the world who, they might believe in Pleiadians and this and that, but at the end of the day, they're being taught a message of peace and love. And a lot of times they even reference Jesus as being a cosmic ruler of the Pleiadians. What's wrong with that? You know what I mean? I think the reptilians always get a bad rap, and I think that's because people like to demonize things based on how they look. That's why I started off this video here with the fact that the Bible says reptilians are on Earth from day one. They're created before us, and they were superior to us biologically and intellectually. So that's probably why Satan's allowed to rule here. His species is just dominant. If you think about it, if God's created the universe with all these planets, all these forms of life on it, just like he allows people on this earth. I mean, I don't think if you go fishing and kill a fish, you're going to be punished for it, right? You got to eat food. It's the food chain, right? The hierarchy. And what makes us, what allows us to eat a lower life form? Is it that we are a higher life form, right? What makes us a higher life form? Is it our intellect? So at the end of the day, it could very well be that God views reptilians as superior to humans. And if God views reptilians as superior to humans, I'm not saying this is the case here, but they might be allowed to predate on humans. If humans are allowed to eat all lesser life forms because we have more intellect, then consider how the Bible says God made the reptilians first and made them smarter than us. Kind of scary to think about, but that's food for thought, no pun intended. It might actually be that, I mean, it's scary to think, I'm just throwing this one out there into the wind, but it's scary to think that, you know, they're allowed to rule this planet over because they are the dominant, superior life form on this planet. That's pretty scary. And maybe that's why they're not punished for going after us or doing bad things to us or even eating us, because they're a higher life form, right? Kind of interesting to think about. I mean, people eat cows all the time. Cows are about as smart as a 4 or 5-year-old child, right? We eat pigeons and birds. Pigeons are some of the smartest creatures on this planet too. They're pretty smart, but we eat them and don't feel bad about it. So if a reptilian has twice our intelligence level, does that mean they're allowed to eat us and they're not going to get in trouble with it, trouble for doing it with God? It's scary to think about, isn't it? Pretty scary. But anyways, that's just food for thought. But anyways, folks, I've taken up enough time for everybody. Oh, good Lord, 52 minutes? Yeah, but you see what I mean? That's scary, isn't it? Right? We can go around the planet as humans and eat anything that's dumber than us. And those are rules God ordained. What about them? And if they are allowed to go around and eat people, I don't believe reptilians go around eating people. I'm just hypothetically pointing something out. They might be allowed to eat people, is my point. And there might be nothing we can do about it. It's kind of scary. Because, I mean, think about it. Pretend you're a chicken. Pretend you're a chicken on this planet and you're living your chicken life, and then one day some humans come out there trying to eat you, chasing you around, eat you. You're pleading to God as a chicken. Dear God, I'm a chicken. Please save me. These big, terrible humans are trying to eat me. God has a choice. He could save your life or not. You know what I mean? But it's the same scenario. Humans running away from some reptilians one day. The humans, us, will be praying to God, oh, please save us from these reptilians. They're coming to eat us. But in the chicken scenario, God will be like, well, humans are superior. It's the pecking order. It's the food chain. That's just how it is, buddy. Maybe I'll save you this time, but one day you're going to get eaten by humans. It could be the same thing for us, right? Kind of scary to think. But anyways, sweet dreams, everybody. Take care. Yeah, I know, exactly. That's the other thing. But if you want to get biblical on stuff, God said that we could eat from all the things on this earth, but he didn't specify in the Bible that the Nahash get to eat us. He didn't say that. But also, lots of other animals on earth have always eaten people. Bears, wolves, lots of animals have eaten us, and he didn't specify that in the Bible. So, but yeah. But anyways, take care, folks. Hope you enjoyed. I'll go through all the comments later. All right.